What's up everybody, Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2017 Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro. Huge thanks to Toyota for providing me with this very sweet Tacoma TRD Pro to review for you guys today. So about the TRD Pro version, well, it just adds an extra dose of aggression to the already very good looking Tacomas. And I already reviewed the TRD Sport version a couple of years ago, but this one has an extra inch lift here in the front. You have the blacked out Toyota grille that I really love, with the Toyota block lettering there. You have a black hood scoop, lots of black accents here. Otherwise, the same attractive headlights. You have these Rigid Industries LED fog lights as well, which are a cool touch. You have a 1/4 inch thick aluminum skid plate there on the front, underneath the front bumper as well. And going down to the sides, you have some pretty bold badging here, and otherwise I love the black contrast on the fender flares that accentuate the cool lines of these new Tacomas. And out back, I still love how you have the embossed Tacoma there in the tailgates. I love the taillights that have a darker and more sinister appearance here on the TRD Pro version as well. And it's also interesting to note this is the crew cab version. This is the only version you can get for the TRD Pro trim, only with the short bed, only in the crew cab configuration. Now, of course, for the other Tacomas, you can get them in different configurations instead, but just one flavor here for the TRD Pro, but I think it'll serve most people just fine. Right, so the interior of the 2017 Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro, well, it's a very rugged and truck-like interior like you would expect, but still is mostly pretty nice. Anyway, though, first things first, sitting down in these seats, you have these leather seats that do have the red stitching and the TRD Pro, stitched into them there, but the leather just feels kind of cheap. Now, this vehicle already has 21,000 miles on it. It's nearing the end of its press vehicle life, so I'm not sure if, that's part of the reason why, the leather just looks a little, more warm, but it just doesn't feel very high quality, and it's pretty firm too. The seats, I actually prefer the seats in the lower version of the Tacoma with the cloth seats. Those are actually super comfortable and really a more comfortable seat than these are. But they also you might be able to hear they already squeak and stuff. Again, I don't know if that's just because of the life this one has lived or what, but anyway, so they're not the nicest seats, honestly, but they're still fine. The bolstering is, what you would expect out of a truck. Next, there's the steering wheel in the Tacoma, which is a really great steering wheel. I really love the perforated leather you have here on it. It has a really good 9-3 grip. It's really comfortable to, rest your thumbs there. Nice 10-2 notches. You have just a few buttons here on the steering wheel, nothing too overwhelming. And overall, a pretty nice and easy to use steering wheel. Gauges in the Tacoma are really nice to look at. I love the graphics, kind of a cool font there for the numbers, and I just like the style of them. They're really good. In the middle there you have a nice color display that is very similar to you see in all the other Toyota and Lexus products, and is a really nice little display. It'll go through all your basics, but one cool thing here I think is exclusive to the TRD Pro is it also will have your roll and pitch angles there displayed, which is kind of a cool little touch. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, first off, right up top you have this I believe it's a 7-inch infotainment screen that is a pretty good screen. So it's very responsive, very high resolution. Everything looks pretty good. Everything is nicely laid out so it's very easy to navigate through. Thankfully, you still have a volume and tune knob, so tuning radio stations and stuff like that is very simple and straightforward. The only thing I can knock this for is not having Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Toyota, in most of their products, has been resisting the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto fad that is getting to be basically standard equipment in just about every vehicle these days, and is a very nice thing to have. And it sounds like Toyota is going to be adopting it here with the 2019 Avalon and a few other vehicles hopefully after that, but unfortunately the Tacoma does not have that functionality, which is the only sore spot that's missing from this. Otherwise though, it still has Bluetooth audio streaming, all that kind of stuff, navigation, maps all look good, and so overall, still a really great head unit. Coming down, you'll see your climate controls here, which are just these nice rugged knobs that don't feel too expensive or anything. They're just plastic, but again, we're talking about a truck here, and so they feel good enough. You have a little display for those. You have your four-wheel drive controller as well. And then you have this other additional row of buttons which controls your blind spot monitoring, whether that's on or off. This ECT power button, which helps with making the transmission more responsive, and I'll talk more about that once we get driving here. You have your parking sensors, USB and auxiliary jack, and you also have a power outlet over here as well. And you also have a Qi wireless charging pad, which, moving on to the storage spaces here in the Tacoma, is actually really good. So like I said, you have the Qi wireless charging pad. Is really great if you have a phone that is enabled for that. Really handy, and it's a very nice large space you can use for other things as well if you don't have one of those types of phones. And so really great amount of space there. Right behind it there, you have two very large cup holders, which are a really nice size. Going over to the doors here, you'll find two more bottle holders, which is really cool. Again, just really awesome amounts of storage space here in the Tacoma. Right behind the shifter, you'll see another little square cubby, which you can use for whatever, and then a third cup holder. So I mean, all things considered, you got two bottle holders in the doors, you got two additional big cup holders there in the middle, so you have enough space. And there's also on the passenger side two more, so really you have 7 cup holders up front here. Overkill, but I love it. I mean, why not? Extra space is always good. And so anyway, nice to have that additional little cup holder here in the middle. Coming back, you also have this center armrest, which actually is softly padded. It's not an expensive feeling material, just kind of rubberized, but nice to have something soft here, because again, from my memory with the Colorado, this is just hard plastic. So for this to be padded is really nice for resting your elbow on. Now, on the driver's side door here, where you rest your left elbow, that is rough, hard rubber still, and I don't know why that isn't padded with some type of cloth or leather instead, because that's just really, I mean, you don't want to put your left elbow on this door. It's just not very comfortable at all. Anyway, coming back to the center here, you open up the center armrest, and then you'll see a nice large cubby. Again, tons more storage space in there, and an additional power outlet as well. So really an excellent job as far as storage space goes here in the Tacoma. Backseat space here in the crew cab version of the Tacoma is pretty good. It's not super spacious, but again, we're talking about a mid-sized truck here. If you want something with tons of rear legroom, you're going to want to move up to a full size. But I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself, I still have about an inch or so to spare there of legroom. Not tight by any means, a good amount of headroom there as well, of course, thanks to the boxy shape. And it's just, a comfortable back seat. It is a very high rear seating position. That's the only thing I noticed about it. It's also got lots of storage space as well. You got 2 cup holders up front here, which is nice. There's also dual bottle holders in both the door pockets once again, and even if you fold down or fold forward that rear seat, you'll also see a nice large additional cubby there, which is kind of cool. It's hidden away, and so overall a really great back seat. The truck bed in the Tacoma, now again, this is the short box, the shorter bed that you can only get here in the TRD Pro. Like I said, if you want a longer bed, you can go to other versions of the Tacoma to get that. But it is a very usable bed. This one also has the bed extender, which helps you get additional length there if you need it. But it's a good size bed. Your average short box here for these mid-sized trucks. It does have a nice little additional pocket there on the driver's side, and on the passenger side there another smaller pocket, and also a 120 volt power outlet as well, which is really nice to have and handy for tailgating, working, whatever you do with those. And so overall, a really good amount of space back there too. The only one thing I will say though is it does not have the built-in steps in the bumper like you see in some of the other trucks out there in the segment, and so that would be nice. It does make it a little bit easier to get in and out of the bed, but not a big deal. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Tacoma, one last complaint I have is this key, which is really cheap, light, plasticky, just a really cheap key. I'm actually kind of surprised. I thought Toyota had nicer keys in the Tacomas, but anyway, that's what we get here, and it still works fine. It's keyless entry and push button start, so you just leave it in your pocket anyway. Hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2017 Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro. Well, the first thing you notice is you're setting up very high here in the TRD Pro, of course, and so, it just gives you a very, very commanding high view of the road. You also have this very large hood you're looking out over, and it does kind of block your view a little bit, but that's kind of what you expect for a truck. It's very cool because you do that little hood scoop and stuff, which gives you a very cool and aggressive view forward. Other things to note, though, visibility out of the sides is good. The B-pillar isn't actually too too thick, so it's pretty nicely set up there. And then view out of the back is pretty good as well, although the headrest kind of partially blocked that rear window, but still pretty good view out of the back. Other things to note here about the Tacoma TRD Pro, it definitely has a very truck-like ride, but I think it's actually a little more refined than I remember the TRD Sport being, and I don't know if that has something to do with the TRD front springs you have here, or if it's the Fox racing shocks that you also have, that they're internal bypass shocks. I don't know much about off-roading and all that type of stuff, but I think it's given it a little bit of a firmer ride, but I think it actually feels better as far as handling goes, and feels a little more car-like actually, and a little less I don't know what the word is, I guess floaty, that you often feel with some trucks. You get less of that here. It's a little more composed, I think, but we'll talk more about that as we go around some corners. Another thing that you notice right off the bat here in the Tacoma is the throttle response. I remember this from the last time I drove the Tacoma. I think this vehicle is the most hesitant to accelerate out of any vehicle that I've driven. It's just like, it does not want to go. It's just such a, the throttle is precise in the fact that it's very responsive, but you still have to push it so far in order to get it to really start going. You really got to prod this thing, like you beg and plead with it, like, come on, please accelerate, please give me downshifts, because it just does not want to do it. I think they tuned this transmission. It's a 6-speed auto. I think they tuned it for better fuel economy, for better numbers and stuff, which is understandable. And like I said, there is this ECT button that we'll press here in a minute whenever we turn down onto a back road. But another thing, as we're slowing down here, is the brakes. Now the brakes, I don't remember this the last time I did the Tacoma, but the brakes have an odd sensation to them where there's not much modulation. It's like you push it in and then you get like all the braking at once. Now it's not quite as abrupt as something like the Alfa Romeos. I complained about their brake feel. This is a little more natural feeling, but it still makes it a little challenging to come to a smooth stop. It's just odd the way that it kind of overfeeds the brake booster or something, and just makes it be a little more aggressive. I wish it was a more progressive, natural feeling pedal travel. Another thing though, cruising now at around 40 miles an hour, is the road noise. Again, I don't remember this from last time I did the Tacoma, so it might be unique to the TRD Pro. It's just a lot of noise. Now, it might be these tires as well or something, but especially in the back there's just a lot of noise. I almost thought the rear window was open for a second because of the noise that was coming through whenever I first started driving this. And then I realized, no, it's just the way this is. And again, we'll see how that, how I get used to that over a few days of driving here, but just something to note as well. All right, so we'll put this into that ECT power button that I mentioned. We'll put it into sport for the transmission. And let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. There we go, as my camera gear goes flying. All right, so it's a pretty good amount of power. Now, you're dealing with a 3.5-liter V6 engine here in the Tacoma that does 278 horsepower and 265 pound-feet of torque, and gets the Tacoma up and going 0 to 60 in about 7.7 seconds. So nothing too hasty, but good enough for a truck, and doesn't feel really slow, especially once the transmission does downshift and start going for it. Then it does feel pretty good. But we're coming up to some corners here, and again, we're in a pretty high truck, so I'm not going to push it too much. Just want to see how it handles here. Actually, it does pretty good. I'm kind of surprised the front end really wants to turn in. I don't know, again, if that's part of this unique tuning they have for the TRD Pro, but this handles better than I remember the TRD Sport handling for sure. Yeah, it's doing a pretty good job. This brake's still a little tricky to manage, and it's still, even with this ECT power button or whatever, it still isn't quite as responsive as I would like. Again, it is a truck, so I kind of have to cut it a break. I can't judge it by car standards, but everything just is a little lazier. Another thing worth noting though is steering. Steering actually has a really good weight to it. Not too light, not too heavy, just right. But it is, a pretty slow ratio for the steering, so it takes a lot of turns to do the steering you want it to do. But that's a given for a truck, especially one that's a little bit higher off the ground like this. You don't want super quick steering, since it could get a little topsy-turvy on you if you push it too much. all things considered, though, this isn't a bad handling truck, honestly. You know, I don't think it's as good as the ZR2 Colorado. I think that still was probably the best handling truck that I reviewed, but it actually does feel flatter than the Raptor. I know they're not really competitors, but the Raptor had a lot more roll to it than this does. I mean, this is still a truck, it's high up. You still had a little bit of body roll there, but it was actually more flat than I was expecting. So I think, again, that's those Fox shocks that are really helping to give it a more planted ride than the other Tacomas and a lot of the other competition out there. Also, if you're curious in regards to handling, this vehicle weighs 4,425 pounds for the curb weight. So not a lightweight, but by truck standards, not that heavy either. So I think that might be part of what's helping this to feel pretty good around corners as well. Now, while I'm mentioning all that suspension stuff and how it feels better here on the road, it actually does better off-road as well. Now, I won't be off-roading this myself because I know nothing about off-roading. People always want me to off-road these trucks that I get and SUVs, but I really, there's no place around here that would really do it justice. And like I said, I wouldn't know what's good and what's not good because I have no off-roading experience, but I will be able to tell you the numbers here. So it is a 6-degree better approach angle thanks to the way they redid that front bumper, and I think the 1-inch additional lift you have there in the front. And they said the breakover angle is also improved by 2.9 degrees as well. And so those two things help to, you know, make it a better off-roader. Has a locking rear diff as well with a little button here up in the ceiling. There's also a mode selector here in the ceiling, and that will you know, have the different terrain management modes. You know, and it's a bunch of different you know, options you can choose from there, you know, depending on what kind of terrain you're on. So it's cool to have all of that. Other truck stuff here to mention as far as numbers go. It can tow 6,400 pounds, which is, you know, the going rate here for this class. And the payload here for the TRD Pro version, at least, is 1,175 pounds. So again, all very average for a mid-sized truck here. And so overall, it does all the truck stuff very well. But I'm going to thanks to Toyota to have this vehicle for an entire week. So I'll drive it around all week, and I'll come back and give you guys my final thoughts on it, as well as my final fuel economy, and talk about the price a little bit too. Alright, so I'm driving the 2017 Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro here for a few more days now, and I've put about 140 miles on it in my time here. And it's one of those trucks that you have to be into trucks. Obviously, I'm not into trucks, so this isn't really my type of vehicle. The throttle response still drives me crazy, even with the ECT power button, like I mentioned earlier. Like, it helps, but it still is just way too lazy, and that's something that other trucks don't have an issue with. If it was a universal all-truck thing, I'd be more okay with it. But you know, you go to any of the Chevy, you know, GMC, any of those, you know, the Colorado, they're all, you know, much more responsive with that kind of stuff. So this truck's just a little softer in its approach. I do like that this Pro version has a little bit of a tighter suspension than the old TRD Sport that I reviewed a couple of years ago, and so that's appreciated. And I do love the look of this, by the way, too. It does look very cool. You know, if you're into, you know, lifted trucks and stuff, I love the black accents. I like the Toyota lettering there and the grille and all those types of things. It does look cool, and especially in white here, I think it's a really nice contrast with the black. So it has a cool look. It's obviously very capable. I obviously have not tested all the crazy four-wheel drive modes and stuff, but like I mentioned earlier, it's got all the improved specs over a standard, you know, Tacoma, so it's much better at off-roading and doing all that type of stuff. So it is, you know, the ultimate version of the Tacoma. The problem is the pricing, you know, because like the standard TRD Sport version, you know, was like low to mid 30,000s. This one, as tested, is $44,815, and at that price, I mean, you're still way cheaper than you know, something like a Raptor or something, which is an actual full-on assault truck, you know, as far as off-roading stuff goes. But it's still just so much more expensive that it's like you could buy a standard Tacoma and put, you know, even like the TRD Sport that I, you know, reviewed a couple years ago. You take that, you can put 10 grand in mods into one and have a way more capable truck than this. So this is obviously for those who want something that's warranted, that's backed by Toyota. You want the OEM, you know, fit and finish and the packaging and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, it is a cool appearance and stuff, but pricing wise, it's just a little high in my book. But again, a lot of the off-road stuff isn't cheap. You know, like I did my review of the Wrangler, and that also is $40,000 for a bare bones Wrangler with all the off-road stuff in it. So all of these off-road toys are expensive, and I get that, but it's still just, you know, to me, it makes it a little bit of a tough sell, you know, because you could go up to something like a Colorado ZR2 or something in that range as well if you want something that's really an intense off-roader. So another thing I want to mention here is the fuel economy, which is lower than it was last time in the TRD Sport. So that, I think I averaged like 19.3 mpg, and I've been driving the same roads, doing a pretty good mix. I did some highway driving a couple of days ago. You know, I've been doing some more extended stuff, not just stop and go, but a lot of stop and go as well, to be fair. But I still only managed 16 miles per gallon, which is way beneath the actual mpg that this is supposed to get, which is 18 city, 23 on the highway, and so it's 16. I'm still 2 mpg lower than the city estimate, and I didn't do strictly city driving. It was, like I said, even more easy with, you know, some highway mixed in. So I don't know if that's partially because of the higher ride height and stuff like that, or what it is. You know, obviously, like I said, I was hammering on this throttle because it wouldn't accelerate as much as I wanted it to and as quickly as I wanted it to. So maybe that has something to do with it, but it still was a little disappointing as far as fuel economy goes. It doesn't even have a V8. But yeah, so I think overall, if I wanted an OEM off-road ready mid-sized truck, I think that I still would probably prefer the Colorado ZR2 myself, just because I think the driver controls and everything, like I said, are a little more responsive, feels a little sportier. But you know, I will say I think the interior in here is a little more plush, which is a nice, I think, trait that all of these new Tacomas have over, you know, all the trucks they're competing against. It's definitely one of the nicer out there, although you don't have the CarPlay or Android Auto like you would have in the Colorado. But yeah, overall, you know, the Tacomas are still really great, and of course, they're famous for their reliability. I mean, these things are almost indestructible. They'll run forever, and so that's, you know, a huge perk of the Toyota as well. But anyway, huge thanks once again to Toyota for providing me with the Tacoma here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the TRD Pro version in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.